It is a gorgeous day at the world's fastest half-mile, Bristol Motor Speedway. Up next on a busy schedule, NASCAR Xfinity Series first practice, 50 minutes for the Xfinity Series to get things warmed up. They'll have another 50-minute run this afternoon and then qualifying tomorrow afternoon for tomorrow night's race. Dave Burns with you along with Nate Ryan to my side. And Nate, when we come to Bristol, it doesn't matter if the stands are full or empty as they kind of are right now, but fun to see cars on track.
Always fun to see cars on track here, and this is quite the view. Thanks for allowing me to share it with you.
You know, it's really not my call, but I'm glad you made it up here. So we are, I don't think we might have done one of these last year, but on the app, it's kind of fun to be sort of a track announcer. You sort of see the whole picture, and we'll show you what we can in terms of cars on track when they take. Track is green, by the way, and have some breaking news thoughts as well. Nate Ryan, as you all know, writes for NBCSports.com and has his podcast where you have learned a lot about all series this year. You've stayed in touch with Nate, so we'll pick his brain a little bit up here. And we'll also talk racing as Daniel Hemrick is the first one on track. So I'm just plugging in all my devices. I'm pulling up all my apps. I'm getting my NASCAR stats out and all kinds of stuff. So as we go along here, try to keep up with Nate and Dave. Actually, keeping up with Daniel has been a chore lately. He's been very quick.
It's pretty good here as well. Best finish of third at Bristol Motor Speedway. What I'm interested this weekend, Dave, is that there are several Cup guys in this race, namely Kyle Busch, and this will be his final start of the Xfinity season in 2018, as we see Kyle getting strapped into the number 18 Toyota right now. So for guys like Hemrick, you know, we talk about this on the Cup Series side. I think Bristol is a real equalizer and a chance for the teams outside of the big three to do well. I think that'll be a storyline going into Saturday night. And I think it's a storyline for guys like Daniel Hemrick going into Friday night as well. And, you know, whether he can do well and outduel some of these Cup regulars that are in this race on Friday night.
I like how you said several Cup drivers are here, and then we showed a shot of Kyle Busch, and I'm like, yeah, there's several Cup drivers in one right there in the Xfinity Series race. He's done so much in this series, and just hard to beat. He's not unbeatable, though, and his teammate, Christopher Bell, may have something to say about that. Bell, leading Rookie of the Year, leading winner on the series. Did you like how we added the moniker the Big Two, Christopher Bell and Justin Allgaier in this series last week?
Clever.
We kind of thought that was appropriate.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Christopher Bell, I think he'll be speaking with the media after this practice, and I think there may be some questions relating to today's big news for him. He's been talked about as to what's going to happen next season, and it appears that there is a vacancy in the Cup Series with Casey Kane announcing this morning that he's leading the number 95 ride. And there's been some chatter that that team is weighing a move to Toyota. And we certainly know that Christopher Bell is planning to stay in the Toyota camp if he moves up to Cup. I mean, obviously he's under contract with Joe Gibbs Racing, but it'll be interesting to see if the number 95 moves to Toyota. And the owner of Levine Family Racing, Bob Levine, told my colleague Dustin Long at Watkins Glen that they're mulling a manufacturer switch. If they do move to Toyota, that could be a landing spot for Christopher Bell next season.
It certainly is part of the picture there. That was one of the first questions that I came up with was, well, hold on. That door doesn't open for Bell unless it is a Toyota, because I think they've been pretty adamant that they're not going to lose Christopher Bell,
right,
as they lost Kyle Larson a couple years ago to Chip Ganassi's Chevrolet Group. But so many young drivers looking for a place to go. Here's one. Austin Cindric in the 12 this weekend for Team Penske. His future very well laid out with Ford, but, you know, all the pieces have to fit at the right time, and if you don't have big news like a driver retiring, there may not be a place to go. Cindric, for his part, thought last week might have been the opportunity. He's been so close all year. But strategy, Nate, really played out here. The 7 team decided to pit about 20 laps later for tires, and it became the factor for Justin Allgaier to get by.
Yeah, it showed how much tires really mattered, Dave, for Allgaier to pass Cindric, who has such immense experience on road courses. Not necessarily in NASCAR, but many other series around the globe. I was surprised. I thought Austin Cindric was headed for his first Xfinity win here.
Put it all together, except for that one piece. And, oh, by the way, Justin Allgaier being a very good road course racer, that had a lot to do with it as well. You don't just run a guy down on fresh rubber. So Cindric this week will be one of a couple of Team Penske cars. 22 is in the field as well, driven by Joey Logano. There's that pretty darn good Xfinity Series and Cup Series and Truck Series driver, Kyle Busch.
And not only is the driver a formidable foe here for the rest of the field, Dave, but the crew chief of the number 18, Eric Phillips, going for his 3rd straight Xfinity Series win as a crew chief here at Bristol. He won most recently with Ryan Preece in the last visit here. So that is a dual threat on the number 18 coming into tomorrow night's race.
Some of that knowledge is just, it's amazing how it reapplies if you've got good equipment and good shoes, which Preece obviously much less experienced, but a very good driver. Eric Phillips just seems to be able to throw that switch when he comes to Bristol.
I mean, Gibbs has really been the gold standard for that, for being able to win drivers' championships with multiple drivers in one car. And I think they found something that works there with grooming crew chiefs at the Xfinity level to move up to Cup eventually, the way we saw Adam Stevens do, and before that Dave Rogers as well. But also being able to juggle both Cup prospects and veterans and the up-and-comers as well, such as Christopher Bell.
On board now with Kyle. Awesome bumper cam shot.
Cool.
There will be 5 cars with onboard cameras this weekend. One of them is not going to be Elliott Sadler. We'd like to have a mind-reading camera on Elliott Sadler this weekend, because his news was big, Nate, and it affects the heart and the head, doesn't it?
It does, and I thought it was touching last night when he put out the tweet saying how deeply affected he was by all the outpouring of gratitude and thanks for what he's done in NASCAR over the past 20 years, Dave. Of course, he's been a fixture in the Xfinity Series for several years, but before that, also did really well in the Cup Series. Last night on NASCAR America and Wednesdays with Dale Jr., I thought it was really poignant what Dale had to say about his friendship with Elliott, essentially saying, there are people who are your friends who sometimes you feel like you're putting as much work into being their friend as vice versa, and he never felt that way with Elliott Sadler. He always felt like Elliott Sadler was so invested in their friendship that whenever they were together, he felt as if Elliott was as into it as Dale was, that he was there for him all the time. And I think Elliott Sadler left that impression probably with a lot of people in NASCAR.
In case you missed it, he announced that he will be retiring from full-time NASCAR racing at the end of this season. Desire to spend more time with family. It's been a good ride for Elliott Sadler. Helmet cam with Justin Allgaier today. Good look here at the somewhat rough ride you get around the concrete half mile. And he'll shut it down for now. 6 laps in the books for the 7 car. Staying with the Junior Motorsports theme, 3rd car, Tyler Reddick. Tyler was a failed to finish last week at Mid-Ohio, and it was a rough day for the driver who started out the year putting himself in the playoffs with the Daytona win. Earlier in the day, Cole Custer had gotten away with a tire rub. Not so for Reddick. Tried to control it, just missed tipped. Going into the corner, Mark slams on the brake. Truex gets around. Watch this. Yikes. And then he got high-sided on the curb, finally got pushed around the track, but retired the car because of the accident. Back on track today and more familiar confines for him.
Yeah, and perhaps a way for him to get back on track. I mean, you're right, Dave. Since winning the season opener at Daytona, I don't think this 2018 season has unfolded the way that Tyler Reddick anticipated. And, it'd be interesting to see with Elliott Sadler leaving the Junior Motorsports lineup how things look for next year. I mean, I presume they're going to stay with 4 cars there at Junior Motorsports, and it'd be interesting to see how Tyler Reddick fits into that going forward. I also just want to say, looking at those highlights from Mid-Ohio, Dave, I think this is just the sweet spot of the Xfinity Series schedule. And I heard them talking about this, Mike Bagley and Pete Pistone on Morning Drive this morning, about how, having 3 road courses with Mid-Ohio and Road America and Watkins Glen sandwiched around Bristol, I think just makes August a real pleasing time to be watching the Xfinity Series.
I would agree with that. And then you throw in September's Roval race.
Right.
It's funny because we keep talking about 3 road course races, and everyone looks at me and goes, no, 4. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I keep doing that, too.
But I found out yesterday, because I asked, when do the Xfinity teams finally get to try the Roval, because the Cup teams have had 2 weeks where they've been able to test 2 days over the course of 2 weeks. But it is the day before, I'm told, that they will get on track for the first time. Now, should you have an issue with the Roval, as many Cup teams did, it's not a lot of time to effect repairs.
No. The Cup teams had enough of an issue that Goodyear decided to change the tire.
Oh, did they? So I didn't know that.
Race next
okay.
Yeah, they had a lot of blistering during that 2-day test that they had a few weeks ago, and so Goodyear has elected to go with different tires. So you're right, I hadn't thought about that. It is an interesting perspective on how the Xfinity Series will handle that. But again, saw it last week at Mid-Ohio, saw it at the Glen. I'm sure we'll see it next week at Road America. I mean, road courses are the new short tracks, and that's been true for a few years, and it's, I think, very, very evident in the Xfinity Series.
Not going to see Joey Logano there that I know of. There's a weekend off for the Cup Series drivers, and I'm pretty sure they're all taking advantage of it. Most likely we'll see Cindric behind the wheel, although I don't know. I've not seen the pre-entry for Road America.
Cindric's in an interesting spot there. I actually had him on the podcast a few months ago where we talked about that he's rotating between not just a couple of cars, but 2 different teams. Sometimes he's in the Roush Fenway number 16, or 3 teams, you're right. Team Penske, he's been in the 22 that we see right now with Joey Logano. He's in the 12 last week, and that's
22 last week, 12 this week.
22 last week.
It's hard to keep up with Austin Cindric's life, and he's not in this car. This is Logano. So yeah, just to confuse. But yeah, what were his thoughts on that? Because normally, it's one car with like 4 or 5 drivers, but now it's one driver with 2 or 3 cars.
Yeah, it didn't really faze him, Dave. I mean, I think he's just appreciative of being able to run full time in the Xfinity Series. I know he did say that when he goes over and runs the Roush car, he does feel as if he doesn't want them to feel as if they're an afterthought.
Yeah.
Because obviously you look at the Penske Xfinity cars. I was talking about how Joe Gibbs has that reputation for rotating drivers and winning owners' championships. Penske, the same thing. Those cars were tip-top, and so I think that Cindric does feel a little obligated, I think, to run as well, or as well as he possibly can when he gets in the Roush car.
That's why he was so devastated at Watkins Glen when he crashed in qualifying, crashed the primary car, and helped them put together the backup car, which was also new, but it was just not seasoned that weekend in the track. This weekend, the 60 will be piloted by Chase Briscoe. There he is now. While Cindric will be in the Team Penske 12. Try to keep up, people. You'll need a program. Chase has a little Bristol experience under his belt with the Truck Series. I believe Ty Majeski was in this car in the spring. And we were talking about development drivers and programs. Ford very much behind what Chase is doing, and Chase with Ford, and attempting to keep that together as he progresses in his NASCAR career.
Now, obviously, things didn't work out quite so well with Brad Keselowski Racing folding its truck team after last season. That left Chase without a ride, but landed on his feet here at Roush. And like you said, definitely has the eye and the support of Ford Performance, and that could help him going forward. Let's
do a little Briscoe look back if we can. Check out the dashboard on Chase Briscoe's car here. It's not supposed to be up like that.
Design flaw? Is that what you're saying?
This was in the 98 car for Biaggi Denbesti Racing, and there might have been where the air came from. Pop that up. Disconcerting at the very least. Had to come down, make a slight repair to that, as well as fix that left front fender, and rolled on, as they say. It's funny, drivers put up with a lot of distracting things. I know last week during the Cup Series race, there was a tether under the, you look out the left front of Chase's window there's a cowl flap that is an aerodynamic device to keep the car pushing air in the right direction if it gets turned around. And there was a tether on Kyle Busch's Cup car that was just peeking out of that. And the problem was it was in the lower left of the window, right where he looks when he's going into the turn. It was driving him crazy.
Right.
And they kept during the pit stops. You don't want to take too much time, but they were trying to get under there and flip that thing in there. I don't know if they ever got it, but drivers like an environment that stays the same. They don't like distractions, and once your car gets destroyed like Chase's was there, I guess you got to put up with everything, right?
They are definitely creatures of habit.
Yeah.
Drivers are.
Yeah. Cole Custer's habit of saving the race car was tested here. Stepping out. There's the limit. Grab it before you get up in the real gray stuff. Cole's one of those California kids that came east. Father Joe is general manager at Stewart Haas Racing. And Cole's had a good ride up through the ranks in NASCAR, Truck Series rides, and full-time Xfinity Series driver again this year. We've seen him progress. And, you know, short tracks have not been their best. He's been better on the mile and a halfs. So this weekend, a bit of a test for him.
But he's on quite a roll. Top 10s in 10 of the last 11 races, including 5 in a row. And he's finished in the top 10 in 2 of 3 starts at Bristol. So, again, somebody who could make a little bit more of a name for himself with this stacked field of Cup drivers, including Kyle Larson, as we see him tour the .533 mile oval now.
It's fun to look back on Kyle Larson. Remember when it was the Kyle and Kyle show? He was chasing down Kyle Busch, trying to get his first win, and now the shoe is on the other foot. Drivers trying to find their way around Larson and Busch this weekend.
Yeah, Bristol Motor Speedway in the Xfinity Series for me, Dave, is really where Kyle Larson's coming out party was, 5.5 years ago when he finished second to Kyle Busch. And I remember distinctly after that race that Kyle Busch does not mince words about the competition. And you could tell the level of respect that he had for Kyle Larson at the time was just first full season in the Xfinity Series. You could tell he knew that Chip Ganassi Racing had something there.
And a driver they knew was going to progress. Matt Tiff trying to be on a similar path, changing over this year from Joe Gibbs Racing to Richard Childress Racing. Jeremy Clements, very excited about next week. Back to Road America, where he won last year. And you never forget in Victory Lane when he mentions, I don't even know how we did this, the car is 10 years old. That's the same car he's been running at the other road courses because they have a much newer car to bring out at Road America, and he is thrilled. I mean, they've done pretty well to make that one work and last and be as fast as it is at the road courses this year, but pretty excited to have something a little newer out of the box. Late race going, kind of like last week at Mid-Ohio. He had better tires than Matt Tifft in the 19 that day. Was able to get it righted quicker after that coming together in the final turn. And then a lap and a half later, cruised to his first victory in the Xfinity Series after years of trying.
The Cinderella story of the 2017 Xfinity playoffs. Of course, he didn't go that far in the playoffs, but just having him in there and having that story to tell about his very tiny team from South Carolina being able to compete for a championship against the heavyweights was a good storyline for NASCAR to have.
Well, it opened up a number of doors for the team. Danny Gill had come over there, I think at the start of the season, maybe midway, but had made a lot of improvements to their processes, but they didn't have a lot of engineering help from Chevrolet. And all of a sudden, when he was in the playoffs, they had some visits and had some more help, and Chevrolet knew that they had a good story as well and did everything that they could to try to move him on in the playoffs, and it was a good run for him last year. This has been the story of the year, and I want to say for Christopher Bell, pretty good handling of himself at the road course races so far this year. Not his best discipline by any means. His first road course start at Watkins Glen, first start at Mid-Ohio, and a couple of decent finishes for him.
Yeah, I think it was telling Dave at the Glen when Christopher Bell was going for his 4th straight win this season in the Xfinity Series. He said that you put another driver in the car that I have, and they're probably a favorite to win. I am not. I thought I was impressed by his candor. That on one hand, he's saying, of course, I want to win 4 straight races, but on the other hand, he's a realist and understood that on his first visit there, he probably was not going to have a shot at winning. But we've seen that his learning curve is highly accelerated, much like the guy we were talking about earlier, Kyle Larson, traversing a similar path from dirt racing up into NASCAR, and now apparently ticketed for the Cup Series in the near future.
Said he would like to do both. It's been mentioned by Coach that he might want to spend another year in Xfinity, which he said is fine, but I'd be also fine, running a few Cup Series races within that, too.
Yeah, and if the opportunity is there for him to run full-time and Toyota can make it happen and JGR can sign off on it, I think he should go. I think if you look at the blueprint recently, Kyle Larson being one, there were a lot of people who didn't think he was ready to step up to the Cup Series when he did in 2014. It worked out fine. Eric Jones last year coming in that second car that Furniture Row had at the time, and now he, of course, is a winner this year in Cup and the number 20 for Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't think you wait. I think if Christopher Bell has that opportunity, he has shown enough in the Xfinity Series to make the leap.
By the way, his road course record so far, 9th at Watkins Glen, 11th last week at Mid-Ohio. So really taking care of the equipment, but not putting himself in bad situations and bringing it home in one piece. And he's got the wins already. His car is loaded with stickers, so he's fine for the playoffs and playoff points. Next, checking out Tyler Reddick again. Reddick, for his part, has taken 18 laps on the half mile so far. See the time up on the left, remaining in first practice. 50 minutes now, 50 minutes later, qualifying and racing tomorrow.
So we take a look at Tyler Reddick making laps here, Dave. I'm interested to watch, where the groove is, because when they did the reconfiguration of the reconfiguration at Bristol Motor Speedway 6 years ago, before this race in 2012, the intention was to move it down the bottom lane, but the first few races, I think drivers had even more success with the top lane. So far in practice today, it looks like we're certainly seeing drivers stay on the bottom through the turns, but we've seen really over the last 10 years that drivers have a little bit more of an option here to move around the track than they did.
Yikes. Ooh. Now I was watching the 3 of Ty Dillon go a little high there.
That was a moment.
Yep. Has it gathered back up, and he's right back in the gas. You're on board with Kyle Busch. So I found out I was in the minority on something here, Nate. I was when they first, now that was the first reconfiguration with the banking, I guess was what we're saying. I was a big fan of that.
Right.
You had, to me, onboard cameras that looked like they were at Talladega or a mile and a half because there was side-by-side racing everywhere. I was a big fan of it, but apparently I was in the minority on that. So when they ground it all down and got back to more of the low groove bumping and banging that people were used to, that seemed to be more favorable.
Yeah. Well, I think that fans expect a certain style of racing at Bristol Motor Speedway, and it's not wrecking that they're coming here to see. It's not the crashing. It's the bumping. It's the rubbing. It's not wrecking. It's rubbing that I think that fans want to see. And when you have options, when you have guys running in the high lane, and you don't get that as much. Although I agree with you, Dave. I found the high lane racing in 2012 and 13 to be very entertaining. But now that Bristol Motor Speedway has applied traction compound to the bottom lane here for, I believe this is the third straight race that they've done that. I think that, you know, they are telling everybody, and they're certainly telling the fans who come here, that we want the bottom to be the preferred groove and where we want to see guys race and do the bump and run.
If we want to see them argue over the bottom line.
That's right.
May happen in practice here. You have to be aware. We're going to have to go to the outside here of J.A. Jr. in the 78 car there, driving for B.J. McLeod this weekend. J.A. is a California youngster who was involved in the Drive for Diversity program a couple years ago and was not seen in NASCAR last year, but called up B.J. and said, you know, I've got some sponsorship. I'd like to run Bristol. B.J. talked to him this morning. B.J. said, let me talk with the series and, you know, see if we're all on the same page.
That approval happen.
Yeah, and they did. And so BJ will actually be in one of Johnny Davis's cars this weekend, the 15. Biggest difference there, when you look at the 78, BJ McLeod goes about 220, 230. AJ is, okay, he's short, and he's about 150, 140 pounds, something like that. I mean, he is a small person. So I was talking to the team earlier today, and they're like, yep, we can move a lot of lead around for that. A lot of tungsten or lead or whatever we're weighing down the frame rails with. We'll make it low and left.
BJ is hard to miss in his Affliction T-shirts and gold chains, and yes, strikes a rather imposing figure. So that is interesting. That sounds a little bit like you have a Skipper and Gilligan type reference.
Little buddy. Sorry, that's the end of my impressions. And Jay is going to shut it down in the 78 as Michael Annette speeds by in the 4th Junior Motorsports car. And the green 19 this week, Brandon Jones. Wow. Yeah, there's not 100% grip down there yet, is there?
No, doesn't appear to be.
So one Truck Series practice this morning, they have worked the sticky stuff and put rubber into the track. Fastest truck, by the way, Maya Snyder for Duke Thorson and the 13 trucks. So there has been track activity. No cup activity today. That'll be all tomorrow and Saturday. And just to give you some idea of where you can find us, we'll be on the app later this afternoon for final practice, as well as NASCAR America to follow on NBCSN. And do not forget the Dale Jr. download at 5:30.
Special guest this week on the Dale Jr. download
is
Terry Labonte, who will tell these stories, the untold stories, about that night, that infamous or maybe famous night, depending on your perspective, that he got spun by Dale Earnhardt here at the night race at Bristol Motor Speedway, August of '99.
Didn't mean to wreck him, just meant to rattle his cage.
Rattle his cage, entered the NASCAR lexicon permanently.
Now that'll be fun. Always love the download with Dale Jr. Enjoying his perspective this year, his enthusiasm, and his friendship. You know, that's another thing with Junior. He gets involved with the crew, and we send him about everywhere we can. So he's involved in about every aspect of what we're doing. So
we saw that last week, certainly in the Michigan infield.
That was interesting, to say the least. Special fans edition, and they went to him. We like looking back, so let's head back to 1995. Nate.
This one went Terry Labonte's way, although he lost a car in the process. He wins the race and enters victory lane with a crumpled mass of sheet metal.
That's what you want to see at Bristol. This is 99 and happened a little differently.
Final lap. Dale Earnhardt, as we said, rattling the cage of Terry Labonte, which essentially meant he spun him. And Dale Jr. talked about this on NASCAR America last night. He said his dad was sort of taken aback by the reception he got because they had 165,000 people, and I would say it's fair to say the majority of them were booing. And Dale Jr. talked about how he remembers that catching his dad off guard a little bit.
It's interesting how the fans ebb and flow. You know, Terry was that lovable, quiet kind of champion, and Junior again. There I go. Senior, obviously the outspoken and rough around the edges and going to rattle your cage kind of driver. And so on any given day, they might have swung one direction or the other.
Right, but they were buddies. And that's something you should tune into the Dale Jr. download, because that's something Terry Labonte talks about. They were actually scheduled to go on a hunting trip after the race here at Bristol 19 years ago. And Terry Labonte will pick it up from there. I'll just tease it that way. It's definitely a story you want to hear.
That's tonight, 5:30, the Dale Jr. Download right after NASCAR America. Tune that in on NBCSN. There it is, captured forever in the grandstands. Saw a moment there. Elliott Sadler not getting as good a run off the corner as Kyle Busch did, and I think Kyle kept it out of the rear bumper of the one car. Speaking of rear bumper, the 11 of Truex will have a shot for you out the back there this weekend. He'll have one out the side. Every time we say there's an onboard camera with a driver, we really mean cameras, because we'll load it up for you. There's that shot out the bumper. It's actually on the deck lid now, so it's a little bit higher, kind of up where the Cup Series vantage point is. It's a good look. See that black dot there? Yeah. Used to have it down on the bumper cover, and I'm told there was just a little bit too much vibration on short tracks like this, so got approval from NASCAR and obviously Team 11 to install it there, so good stuff. Our friends at BSI providing those looks, and Andy Jeffers getting it done for us. So when we say there's a couple of looks at the incident we just saw, it typically involves one of those cameras.
That's
here at
how
Bristol.
it happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot to look at tomorrow night from that view.
We are hoping.
Throughout the race.
So 28 laps for Hemrick. Again, opening practice here is expected to get hotter and more humid throughout the day. Final practice coming just after the lunch hour, 1:30 this afternoon on the NBC Sports app. So there'll be a little bit debrief time here. But typically at Bristol's the same way. I'm going to believe that when the cars leave the shop these days, they've got to be just about right.
Right.
You're going to be able to change some things, but you leave the shop the way that you expect to race.
Yeah, we've heard drivers talk more and more about that in this age of computer simulation setups and the ban on testing. You pretty much do just roll in, and what you got is what you got. I talked to Eric Jones last week at Michigan, Dave, and he explained to me that if you show up and unload Cup or Xfinity Series with a car that's running somewhere in the 20 to 25th range speed-wise, you're probably not going to get into the top 15. That's just the way things are these days. That's how competitive it is, and that's how precise teams are with being able to set up their cars for optimal performance.
18 minutes remaining here if you would like to get something done. Cindric's going to shut it down. Had a chance to stop by 55 car today. That's Bailey Curry from Texas. Bailey joined this team in New Hampshire, and the ride had been sort of left open by Brandon Hightower doing something different, and so he did a good job for him there. He said, I'd like to get back in it when I can. Bristol's his next stop. Talked to Chase Kallenbach, the crew chief on this car, and he's very high on this young driver. And he was one of those names, was Bailey Curry, that you just sort of hear it. You know, when you're out in the garage area there and people are looking for rides and cars are looking for sponsored drivers, and you start hearing about kids that are quick. And Bailey was one of those that Chase told me he had heard about, and when he finally met him and saw what he could do behind the wheel, he was duly impressed.
Well, he's got a catchy name. Bailey Curry, and as you mentioned, Case Kallenbach.
Did I say Chase? Yeah, sorry, I meant Case, yes.
Bailey Curry and Case Kallenbach. That is my all-name team for this race in the Xfinity.
Well, there you go, or at least for this practice. You're going to go for the whole race?
Driver Bailey Curry and crew chief Case Kallenbach. Yeah, I'll take the weekend.
All right. New category for Nate. I like it. Speaking of Texas, here's David Starr. Has had a little more opportunity at the restrictor plate tracks, as often is the case, and the short track and the road courses sometimes present those opportunities, but David would probably tell you he's more of an oval track guy. Talked to Joey Gase this morning. I said, you know, you kind of became a social media sensation last week after your dust-up. He goes, oh. I said, but I had more people tell me they've never seen Joey Gase so frustrated after a race as he was. He said, well, I spoke my mind. I said, good for you, young man.
Yeah. It's great to see that passion, those emotions on display. He tends to be the quiet, unassuming type, kid from Iowa, and we certainly saw he and Ross Chastain had a difference of opinion over the way Mid-Ohio ended.
Here it was, late in the going. Gase holding down a nice spot there, and a little bit over-aggressive in his mind from the 4 of Ross Chastain. You see the hood popped up, you got to believe that. And this was the dust-up, which was quickly overcome by cooler heads. And here's what Joey had to say when it was all done.
I don't really appreciate that a whole lot. He's kind of Johnny Davis's golden child and can't do anything wrong. And he forgets that we're right there with them now. And the funny thing is, he also forgets is that he's trying to get in the chase, and the only way we can do that is we win. So he's trying to do that off a point. So can make that really, really difficult for him. And people just got to remember that we're here to race too.
16th for Chastain when it was done, 24th for Gase, and so that's why he was so miffed. But I believe he let Ross know that he might want to look in his rearview mirror a few times for the 35 car.
And as he pointed out, I mean, the stakes are fairly high for Ross Chastain trying to make the playoffs without a victory. He's won in other series, but doesn't have that win in the Xfinity Series. Been talked about a lot this year as somebody who maybe is an underrated driver, could be in the mix perhaps for some cup rides even in the future. But he's got more on the line right now with trying to make the playoffs. And, Joey Gase, I think, not so subtly said that I might not cut him breaks in the future as he needs to get into the playoffs on points. So that could be a developing story that we see play out a little bit more tomorrow night.
Speaking of a lot on the line, nice save there, by the way, getting out of the groove, Ross Chastain. Phil Swift is here. Do you know who that is?
I do, because you told me.
He's the Flex Seal guy. He's here this weekend. He's probably going to cut something in half and fix it with his product.
Well,
but they're running all of the Flex Seal, Flex Tape, Flex Glue products on Johnny Davis's cars, so that'll be big fun for them this weekend. And how about Johnny Davis? 4 cars entered this weekend. He gives so many drivers a start in NASCAR. Catherine Legg at Mid-Ohio last week had a great race. I was down talking to him this week about how well she did before they had motor failure, which they said was not her fault. There were no missed shifts. The revs were all fine when they checked it out later. But she'll be back at Road America next week.
Yeah, that was a great story to see her just parachute into that series with no knowledge of ever running a car that heavy before. And she acquitted herself quite well, I thought, before the engine failure.
Well, and they had, is anybody drinking this early in the day? They had wheel hop in the 15 severely.
That is the drinking word?
It was last week. Trust me on that. And they were hoping that they could get it out by qualifying, and they did, and they promised her that she would like the car a lot better, and she did, and once drove from the rear of the field when they pitted up to 14th, so Catherine had a good weekend. And had always said she wanted to drive in NASCAR, and she's having her opportunity this year. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, good for her. Again, like, she's used to cars that turn and stop on a dime, which is not the case for a heavy stock car on a road course, and,
nope.
And she did pretty well.
Although I think Cindric could probably make a stock car stop on a dime on a road course. I'm convinced he can do a lot behind the wheel.
His pole-winning lap last week certainly took everybody's breath away. I mean, it was so much faster. And again, I think speaks to the fact that he has a broad skill set, talent base, and so many other series. Whether it's rally or in sports cars. And I think that probably really helps him, Dave, as we talked about, switching between teams, bouncing between cars. It's not something that is foreign to Austin Cindric, and he gets acclimated fairly quickly. And we're seeing right now he's turning the 9th fastest lap here in this opening practice for tomorrow night.
Finished 3rd in the Truck Series point standings last year. And now trying to, is most likely going to make the playoffs on the strength of his runs in 3 different cars, but will be running solely the 22 car when it comes playoff time. So that'll be a nice simplification, if you will, for him. Ryan Sieg, happy to be back at an oval. Saw Cowboy Starlin, the crew chief, down there this morning. Yep, not necessarily our strong suit, the road courses, but got through it. Broke a motor, but okay. They'll move on.
Cowboy Starlin has had some success at this track when he was Carl Edwards' crew chief in the Truck Series, I believe. He probably.
Yeah, it might have been. Well, yeah, because that's where he started with Biffle.
Right.
And he may have had success here with Biffle in the Truck Series. I'm not sure. Yep, Cowboys, good people, been doing this a long time and making it work at RSS Racing. Speaking of making things work, look at all the winner stickers on that 22. 5 of them this year. Joey's been responsible for some of them. Austin's trying to get one on there from him. They are looking strong again this year. Brian Wilson and that group doing a great job. Let's see, how does Joey look on averages? I'm just picking it up. First in 10 lap averages for that 22, so that is telling. Michael Lynette's 5 car, right now 18th quick on single lap times. Made a crew chief change over there a couple of weeks ago. Trying to get Michael's program a little bit further down the road if they can.
We know that he'll be back next year.
Yes, that's right. Been talked about. Not going to miss the 23 car this weekend. No, sir. I told them that. They said, well, you mean the face or the color? I said, well, a little of both. Ollie's face back there and the yellow color. Of course, Chase this weekend. Next weekend, we get Awesome Bill back behind the wheel. That is going to be a treat.
I heard Chase Elliott say this week that he sent his dad an email with tips on how to get around Road America, and it felt more than a little bit awkward.
It didn't go into the junk mailbox?
No. And I think he also was poking fun at the fact, there's an interview I heard, I think when GMS unveiled the paint scheme that Bill Elliott will be running next week at Road America. You know, Chase also poked a little bit of fun at the fact that his 62-year-old dad's going to be attending the rookie meeting.
Yes.
Next week.
And guess who? No, he won't. Actually, he won't be there doing that. It was funny because last night, saw Parker, and Parker Kligerman does the rookie meeting for the trucks. Wouldn't that be funny if Parker, who's not racing, was doing the rookie meeting? But now that'll be something special, and just so much goodwill when you see a Hall of Famer like that at the track, and you love to bend his ear to tell him thank you, and then thanks for giving us a show another time.
And I believe he could be high. I mean, we've seen this 23 car do well, Dave. He could be highly competitive. I mean, he still runs. He doesn't compete in NASCAR, but he's still out there running sports cars and running these vintage car events on road courses. He was at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Bill Elliott was a few months ago with Ray Evernham, and I think he could be a factor. I mean, certainly he's going to be the focus, but I think he could also maybe be a factor in that race. To your point, Spencer Gallagher finished 8th in this car last week, and the week before, the Dinger, 2nd, coming to the line, got by Justin Allgaier in the final turn. So you are right. Take a couple laps with Christopher Bell. And we know how much Kyle Larson loves Bristol Motor Speedway, and I would presume that Christopher Bell, coming from that same dirt racing background as Larson, probably loves the bullring style of this track versus others. This is, I would think, where he is at home as much as any track in the Xfinity Series. Christopher Bell cut his teeth on these sorts of tracks the same way Kyle Larson did.
Not afraid to hang the back end of that car out. May not always be the fastest way, however. That's been sort of the learning process. But certainly car control, if it does get out of shape, I'm not worried. Looking at lap averages for him, 3rd on the 5-lap average, 4th on 10-lap averages.
Yeah, that shot him into the top 5 on
single lap times.
Speed, single lap.
These will be 2 cars to watch tomorrow night as well. Kyle Busch, his final of 7 Xfinity races allowed by a full-time Cup Series driver, will happen tomorrow night. And remember, looking forward, just 5 races remaining until the 12 driver 7-race playoffs start at Richmond. Be Vegas the week before. Will be their play-in race, if you will. And the Cup Series will get started with their playoffs, but these guys will begin at Richmond. And Dale Jarrett and I were talking about this. It is a fast playoffs because it's 3 races less than the Cup Series. Right. You got to be on your game right away. Right. No room to give. We'll hop from Justin Allgaier to Cole Custer. Custer's car 8th quick so far in first practice. 5 minutes remaining. We'll say goodbye to you at that point, and then we'll see you back here on the app at 1:30 for final practice. Track should be a little bit more rubbered in then. Heat of the day might be a little slicker. And then, of course, everybody adjusting for qualifying about the same time, a little bit later tomorrow afternoon, and then night racing, or evening racing, I guess I should say. Sun will still be out when they start.
It's a little bit of a different rhythm to the weekend this year, Dave, where they've moved the truck race to Thursday night and turned this into, as you mentioned, a full day of activity. In the past, it would be Wednesday night truck race, and sometimes the Xfinity cars would only get on track Friday, and they'd practice, qualify, race all the same day. So a little bit of a different approach for these teams to get time to get up to speed.
Ty Dillon will be in the 3 car this weekend. What a disappointment for him last week, hitting a large piece of debris. Nate, did we ever find out exactly what it was that his 13 Cup car struck at Michigan?
I don't know if we learned definitively, Dave, but I think we can deduce the evidence is strong that it appeared to be the battery out of Timmy Hill's number 66 car. We had Scan All this week on NASCAR America, in which we played the radio chatter from the number 66 car right after Ty Dillon hit that debris at Michigan, and the number 66 team found that, lo and behold, their battery was missing. So I think if you put 1 and 1 together, you get 2, and unfortunately for Ty Dillon, you get a situation where he got knocked out of the Michigan race, as we're going to see right here.
You can see the battery coming out initially. There's Hill's car. And as we NBC it right there.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Ka-bounce, ka-bounce. And then it got knocked into the lower groove, and here comes Ty. Nope, avoided by Larson. Ty slipped out to try to make it around the 78 or avoid the 78, and just look at the car hop. I mean, that was an impact.
It destroyed everything. The oil cooler, radiator, I'm sure it damaged the chassis in some way, and it was kind of amusing to think about, or funny to watch in some ways, but in another way, I mean, he didn't have control of the car because there's oil all over the tires. He slides up, hits the safety barrier, and thank God he didn't get hurt in that type of situation.
Yep, that was a pretty hard hit. You see the side of the car there. Safer barrier taking the full impact there, and Ty getting out and walking away, which is the good part, and no one felt worse than Hill's team that had happened. So, let's see if he can make better on his Xfinity Series run tomorrow night. Again in the 3 for Pop Pop. And that car has a winner sticker on it from earlier this year too. So a few winners in the field. Daniel Hemrick still looking for his. Will it come tomorrow night? Brandon Jones would like to put the 19 in victory lane for Joe Gibbs Racing. Young Atlanta driver. That's a little
that was a
clip of the lip right there. Not sure that's the way you want to exit that corner all night. But there are things to watch and places to go where you can find a little bit of an advantage and your car will go there. You can make lap time. And everyone trying to work that grip strip down low, Nate, and see what they can determine is the grip level.
Right. Have to go all the way to the edge with the traction compound down there. That certainly changes the game a little bit.
There it is. A couple of crew chiefs looking at it with me this morning were saying they don't think it's as much. It's not the full 2 groove or groove and a half it's been in the past, right? So still wanting it to be tempting, but maybe giving you that groove and a half to second groove up option as well.
And I suspect that perhaps in second Xfinity practice and certainly in the Cup Series practices tomorrow, I think Kyle Larson will probably be one of the guys that goes up top and tries to work in that upper groove as much as possible. He did that last year. Again, he's a guy who prefers to rim ride and keep it up there by the wall. So I suspect by probably the end of tomorrow night's race, drivers will have a little bit more of an option than just this bottom lane with the sticky stuff.
The goal is controlled road rage here at Bristol Motor Speedway. I don't think that's in their marketing plan, but it's kind of the way I see it. And they'll have it here. So that's going to do it for first practice. Final moments. Allgaier getting his laps in the 7 car. Chasing a championship again for Junior Motorsports. He certainly will find himself part of the playoff picture come Richmond. Take a look at your speeds from practice today. Larson quickest in single lap times. You can see it is heavy at the top with the Cup drivers.
Indeed. 3 of the top 4 spots there.
Chase Elliott in 6th as well. Show you what's coming up here this afternoon. We remind you, 1:30 for us on the app for final practice. 5 o'clock NASCAR America, and then don't forget the Dale Jr. download. How about tomorrow? Keep it right here, 10:30 a.m. Monster Energy Cup Series practice, and just keep it on NBCSN all day because it'll end with the Xfinity Series race. Saturday, more good stuff, including the night race at Bristol for the Cup Series. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you at 1:30.